Hello and welcome. In today's video I'm going to show you how I made these barefoot leather sandals for my husband's birthday, which is today. In today's video I'm going to give you everything that you need if you want to make them, as well as tips on how to adjust it if you want to make some adjustments to suit your preferences with the shoes that you want to make. In this video I'm going to show you what I did and speak through it, as well as all my tips. But if your preference is to read written content, I've also linked down below the blog that I also detail all of the steps to making these shoes in. I'm going to give some slight background to us and the shoes and why I decided to venture into making them. And we are a barefoot family. We have been for many years. Started with my husband, and then I sort of was like, okay, I'll get one pair, and then you don't just get one pair of barefoot shoes. You start to feel so uncomfortable in all your shoes, and next thing you know, here we are a few years later where we don't have any non-barefoot shoes. And usually, for the most part, we have always purchased those shoes from a barefoot company. Vivo Barefoot is the one that we most of our shoes from, but then living here in Canada, we found that we needed some shoes that we couldn't just easily buy. So last winter I had some made for myself and for Elba for the winter. And then this summer was where I decided to venture into starting to make some shoes for us. And this came about from thinking I'm not able to find exactly what meets our needs, or if I am able to find it, it's really expensive, or I would have to import those shoes. And the reality actually just is, with our general approach to life, our very sort of natural way of living, very focused on certain things, I think it's just a natural progression that you end up making loads of your own stuff when you can't find what you're looking for, you can't find it in an affordable way, or you want to customize it. So that's essentially what happened with these shoes. But more specifically, why I decided to make my husband some barefoot sandals is, for a long time he has wanted the Earth Runners. They're very popular shoes. People love them for good reason. They look fantastic. And then a couple months ago he was like, you know what, I'm going to take the plunge. I'm going to buy them. They're on the pricier side. A lot of barefoot shoes are. And we're like, okay, great. You're going to wear them a lot. It'll be awesome. But then, going through it, it's in US dollars, and we still have to import them into Canada. And there are also quite hefty import tariffs and things at the moment. So now you're looking at a shoe that's pricey, and then you're adding some more price on top of that. It just didn't seem worth it to buy them with all the costs that we're racking up with them. And I felt pretty sad for my husband because he was really excited about that. And I didn't think that it was possible for me to make barefoot sandals. But then also with our toddler, she loves shoes. Girl loves shoes. And she is really into sandals at the moment. The ones that she wears, you're going to see them, footage of it in this video. She loves those. They are barefoot sandals, but they're 2 sizes too big for her. But she wants to wear them all day, every day. Started to realize with our toddler that I think that I need to figure out how to make shoes if we want these very specific shoes for her. That as she's getting older, it's quite common for babies to find very soft leather based shoes, but then as they get older they get a lot more chunky and it gets a lot harder to get them those types of shoes. So I started looking into, can I do this? Is this a possibility? And then I came across loads of, as you do, different shoes that people have made, different barefoot sandals. There's lots of different types of barefoot sandals out there, and I kind of had to comb through them and see which are the ones that look like I want to make them and they're going to meet our needs. And I came across, and these are inspiration blogs, they are linked down below as well, 2 blogs that made this type of shoe. I'm going to put the name of the shoe on the screen because I'm not that good at pronunciation of things. These are the types of shoes that I think these technically are, or the inspiration that I took for them, or the type of lacing of these shoes. The one blog is a Canadian blog and the other one is German, and I used Google to translate it. One of them did do it with a sole the way that I did, and the other one did it without a sole. So on that note, let's talk about the tools that you're going to need or want to make these shoes. Right, so the first thing is, if you are going to make a sole like I did, you need a sole, or you need whatever you're going to use for the sole. In the blog that I took inspiration from, he actually purchased the Earth Runner soles and he used that. In my case, what I did was I used 3mm rubber crepe, which as you can see is flexible but very durable. I got the idea from the winter shoes that I had made for me and for Alba that are based off of like native Canadian shoes. They had rubber crepe soles that were flexible but also so durable. So these soles of these shoes are rubber crepe. Yes, ideally I would have wanted to get them in black, but it was not that easy for me to source everything that I needed for all my many different projects. I'm not just making sandals, so I just went with what I could get. I specifically wanted to go to the shop and feel it as well, since this was my first time buying rubber crepe. Anyway, I would recommend if you can get it in a darker color, do so, because it's shoes, but that's just, I couldn't. Rubber crepe is a great sole base. It's flexible, it's barefoot, it's awesome. Obviously, if you're going to ground your shoes, then like rubber is not grounding, it's the opposite of grounding. So then that's something you might want to look into, whether you want to just like put copper into it or you want to use a different type of sole that feels more grounding. Or if you want to go with the option where you don't do a sole at all. So like I said, the other blog, they did not do a sole. If you're going to do that, what I will recommend, and this is the next one, if you're doing leather like I did for these, get a thicker leather than what I used. Leather is a skill to work with. I am not quite there where I want to venture into like proper leather works. So with this sandals that I'm making for Alba, our toddler, I picked a very soft leather that I'm able to stitch with a leather needle with a normal non-industrial leather sewing machine. So because I was buying that for her, I was like, I'm going to use the same leather for these shoes. So this is the leather that I have. It's pretty durable, it's pretty good, but it is very thin. So I recommend, if you're not gonna have a sole, go for a thicker leather piece and then just don't do the sole part. And then that brings me to the next thing. So I did do leather for these shoes, but the only reason I did leather for these shoes is because I was buying leather to make shoes for our toddler. My husband intends to run in these sandals. That's what he wants them for. Now, while lots of people run in leather shoes, I thought that maybe canvas would be nicer for him if he wants to run in them. So I said to him, okay, let's make a lifestyle shoe first, see how it goes, see how I do it, and then I will source some canvas, some organic cotton canvas, and I will use that instead of the leather, and those might be nicer for running. So if you're considering what you want to make them out of, I don't think you have to stick to leather. I definitely will be venturing into making the top of these in canvas rather than leather to, I guess, like less of a slip for your foot when you are running. However, honestly, lots of people run in them with the leather. So I'm just sharing that as an option. Then the next thing that you need is laces. We got leather laces as well, because again, we went into a leather store. I was sourcing lots of things. I got 3mm laces. I would recommend getting thicker laces. They're fine. Could definitely like a lifestyle shoe kind of look, but I think practically I would recommend going for a thicker lace. With the running ones, I'm going to decide and see what I can get. I will share that, so feel free to subscribe to my blog to see when I start to upload those things. I'm not sure yet what is going to be best, either a thicker leather lace or a different type of lace. I'm going to give it some consideration and see what we want to go with there. Leather is really nice for lace because it's kind of like, it has like a slight stretch to it, but it's also very durable, and it also kind of gets soft over time, so it feels nice on your feet. So I do like leather laces. I just think get a little bit thicker than what I went with. Was a bit limited with my options because I bought everything in the shop on that day. The next thing you need is a leather punch. This is whether you're going to do it with leather or not, because you need to punch some holes, or you need to make holes in some way. a leather punch is the neatest way for you to make holes for the sandals. So get a leather punch. I have linked down below as much as possible like where and what I got. If you wanted to copy it, this is not a very expensive leather punch. Then it's just like a cheap one off Amazon. And then the next thing that you need is do not try to cut through rubber crepe, the sole, or leather just using normal scissors. I would not recommend that because you are going to most likely damage the material in the way that you're trying to cut it if you're cutting with the scissors that are not good enough to cut through those materials. I do have sewing scissors, so that would also be a good option. Those are pretty great to cut through things, but I'm not willing to blunt my sewing scissors to cut through leather. So when we're in the leather shop, we asked for a recommendation for scissors that can cut through leather and the rubber crepe. And this, literally less than $5 or around $5 pair of scissors was recommended to us because scissors can get very expensive. They were fantastic to cut through both the rubber crepe and the leather. I had no issues using these to cut through this. So that was a fantastic recommendation by the salesperson. But I do recommend, like, if you're a DIY kind of person like me, just have different scissors for different things. Have your sewing scissors, have your cut paper scissors, and then have your cut through the sort of more thicker materials that are typically going to blunt your other scissors. Then another one that you need is you need a type of glue, if you are doing a sole, that can stick leather to whatever sole you are using. Not all glue can, so have a look at what type of glue you want to get. I did not feel like buying more stuff and sourcing more things, so I used the shoe glue that we have from fixing other shoes. And you can watch this video for my tips on how to make that work, because I did have some challenges in that regard, learned some lessons. And then some two maybe optional items is washable markers that you can, because there's a lot of drawing outlines in the making of these sandals. There's a lot of, because you're doing it like to the foot, so there's a lot of cut it too big and then work back to get it to be the final size you want it to be. So I have my normal, this is what I use for sewing, but this does not show up on leather. So I also have a white chalk one that does show up on leather, but I am able to wash it off and it comes off. And then the other thing that I used was sewing clips. They were just useful too when I was making the sole touch the bottom part to clip it together. But those I think are like optionals. You can work without it or figure out another way to mark. But the marking is actually quite an important step to making these sandals. You spend a great deal of time doing that. Since there's no actual sewing involved in making these are literally making holes, gluing them, cutting, and lacing. That's all that goes into them. Final thing before we get into exactly how to make these, just remember, because they are barefoot sandals, it's more important for them to be functional and healthy for your foot than it is for them to be super aesthetically pleasing. While I can understand that may be very important as well, it's just that the point of us making these shoes is to promote your natural foot movement while still giving you some kind of protection underneath your foot, because if, like my husband, you're running around in the urban place, your foot can get damaged a little bit. My advice is just to make sure that whatever materials you pick are durable, but they're also still very flexible. And that's what you want, because you want it to mold to your foot and you want it to move naturally with your foot, because they are barefoot sandals and not just normal sandals. That all being said, let's get into how I made those sandals.
Step 1 of making the barefoot shoes is get some paper that is large enough to trace your entire foot. Step on it and make sure that the weight of your feet is equally distributed. Take a pen or a pencil and trace the outline of your feet, making sure that you trace all of the toes, in particular the big toe and the second toe, because there's lace that goes between those toes, as well as the bone that is on the outside of your big toe and the bone that is on the outside of your little toe. You want to make sure that your pen or pencil is going almost straight down to get the most accurate tracing of your foot. But with making these shoes, we are going to adjust the size as we go along. And since you can't add shoe, it's best to go on the bigger end and then you can always cut it away later. But it is still good to get a accurate outline of your foot because we're going to use this to determine initially where we want to place the laces. Really mark well the big toe and the toe next to it because you're going to put a lace in between that. So lace hole number 1 is the one between the big toe and the toe that's right next to it. And then lace number 2 is the one that's on the outside of the toe. So you can see I made an X marking here on the outside of the toe for lace number 2. And then by the small toe, I'm also going to make a marking on the outside. That's where lace hole number 4 is going to go. So you want the lace hole number 4 to be almost just at the bottom of the little toe, where the little toe starts. Just down from that, you want lace hole number 3. Then we also want 2 more lace holes, and those ones are on the outside of your ankles. I recommend making them quite close to your foot. As you can see on the image, those are generally where you want to be putting your 7 lace holes, and you want to just mark that out while you are drawing out the outline of your foot. Now grab some paper scissors because we're going to cut out our foot traced outline that we made, but be sure to cut leaving enough space for the lace holes. So you can see that I did about 5 millimeters outside of the foot line that we made. You want to make sure that you're allowing enough space for those lace holes, but also with these shoes, constantly just remind yourself you can always cut away, but you can't add. So we're going to be using this paper pattern to cut out of the sole and also the leather or whatever you are using for the bottom of your shoes. So you just want it to be rather on the larger end and you can always cut away later. Next up, we want to clearly mark where we want the lace holes to go. As you can see, I spent a little bit of time contemplating this, but to assist, you can use the image of the lace holes, and that is also linked down below. You want the holes to be quite close to your foot so that it is nicely holding the foot. Otherwise, you're going to have an issue where your foot is slipping around in the shoe, and these are not those kind of shoes. The purpose of the laces is to strap your foot to the sole in such a way that you are naturally moving your foot and your foot is not slipping around. When we have closed barefoot shoes, yes, of course, then we want space and we don't want it touching our toes, but sandals are not those kind of shoes, and we want the laces to be holding our foot nice and tightly. Now that we have our shoe pattern, we're going to use that to cut out of the rubber crepe sole. I used a 3 millimeter rubber crepe, and I used the leather punch to punch holes into the paper itself so that I could mark the lace holes through that paper. I did do a test quite a few times on the different materials that I used, so on the paper, then on the rubber crepe, and also on the leather, to see whether I was happy with the size of the hole punch that I was using such that the laces would fit through them. I used a fabric marker to mark on the rubber crepe where I wanted to cut. And as you can see, I only did the lace hole markings after I cut the rubber crepe. And that was purely because it was my first time cutting rubber crepe. So I wanted to have that experience and then make those markings. But I think it would be better if you made those markings while you're doing the outline of the shoe. It isn't shown here, but between when I did the markings for the lace holes and before I cut them, I took them back and I put my husband's feet onto them and we had a discussion about the placement of the lace holes. And we actually made some adjustments to where we thought it would be best to place some of them. And I think that that's really helpful before you do that. Once you've cut the base of your sole, what you're using for your sole, is to just go back and check if you really are happy with where you're going to place those lace holes. We ended up moving some of them a little bit closer to his foot. Having checked the sole on my husband's feet as well as having made the lace holes, I felt confident to cut away a little bit more of the rubber crepe and make the shoe a little bit smaller. Now we can use the rubber crepe sole to mark onto the leather or what you're using to go on top of your sole so that we can cut that out. Because I was using black leather, I used a white chalk marker that is washable. I used the holes in the rubber crepe sole to mark where the lace holes need to go in the leather as well. But because we didn't punch hole number 1 and 2 that are next to the big toe hole into the rubber crepe, I did by accidentally punch hole number 2, but you do not need to punch that hole into the rubber crepe. It only needs to be done into the leather or what you're using on top of the rubber crepe. But because we don't have those holes in our rubber crepe, I used the piece of paper from earlier to mark those holes onto the leather. When cutting the leather, I didn't cut on the outline that I drew. I gave it some space, almost like a seam allowance, and then I cut quite a bit on the outside of that, just knowing that I can cut it away at a later point, but I can't add any leather if I were to cut it too small. I did use the outline to make sure that where I was placing it on the rubber crepe lines up with where we want those lace holes to go. Now I punched only 2 of the lace holes, the 2 that are next to the big toe. This is because the laces by the big toe go under the leather, but they don't go under the rubber crepe, and all of the other lace holes are used through the rubber crepe, but for now we just need the lace holes that are next to the big toe. Not shown here, but I used a measuring tape to measure out 1.6 meters of lace, and I cut 2 of those, 1 for each shoe. This lace goes beneath the big toe, so in both cases you want to push it from the bottom of the lace hole out through the top. We also want to make sure that the lace is not twisted beneath the toe. It is in my case, so I just need to straighten that out. Here you can learn from me. The blog that I based this off of said to have at least between 45 to 60 centimeters of lace that's coming out of lace hole 1. So that's the lace hole that's more to the middle of the shoe. And I did do that, but I kind of made them almost equal parts on both sides. However, once I did the lacing, I realized you need a lot more lace that comes out of hole number 1 versus the lace that comes out of hole number 2. So I would actually recommend to do more than 60 centimeters of lace out of hole number 1, and then you can do less out of hole number 2. We need to decide the length of the lace up front for this part because the lace that goes underneath the big toe is going to get glued to the sole, and then it's going to be fixed into place. Now it's time to glue the leather top to the sole. I used shoe glue because that's what I had on hand, and then made sure to spread glue everywhere on the leather to make sure that you really don't want the sides of it peeling up. So really spread it nicely to all the sides of it. But here you can learn from my challenge. I only put the glue on the leather, mostly because I was having a bit of a hard time spreading it, but I didn't really think it through. Where it is really, really important that you put your glue on your top as well as on your sole. So I didn't do that, and then essentially the glue kind of sits a bit on the leather and doesn't really stick to the rubber crepe as well. Once I glued it, I used the sewing clips to clip it, and then I placed a whole lot of my very heavy books on top of it to press it together, and that worked well, but I had a lot of doubts and I went back to check and I just felt like this was not secure enough. So I actually ended up pulling up sides of what I glued to put glue onto the rubber crepe, and thankfully that did work. But just learn from what I did and put the glue on both the top and on the sole, and then press them together. Put a bit of sewing clips just to like hold it in place for maybe a couple of minutes until you feel it's secure. And then I placed a whole lot of heavy books on top of it and left it overnight for the glue to properly set. Then when I was done with shoe number 1, I repeated all those steps onto shoe number 2, also so that I could glue it nicely and then put a whole bunch of heavy books on top for the glue on both shoes to set overnight. Here we are the next day. The glue has had an opportunity to set really well. Shoe glue does take really, really long to get to its like full strength, but it was more than sufficient for me to do the rest of the shoes and finish them up. It was properly holding. Please excuse the out of focus and the camera angle. I do have a toddler and my DIY things have to just be flexible in the way that they get done. But the step that we're on now is to punch the remainder of the holes that are in the rubber crepe, then through that rubber crepe and punch that hole in the leather and cut away the excess leather that is on the outside of the rubber crepe. Now to do the lacing of the shoe. This definitely got a lot easier the more that I did it, but it felt a bit confusing initially. You want to start from the lace that's coming out of hole number 2, and you want to take it to position number 3, take it through the top of hole number 3, and then you're going to go to hole number 4, but from the bottom of the shoe and come out of the top of hole number 4. Here's the second shoe that I did because sadly my camera battery died. I'm just using a yarn needle to help me get the lacing through the hole because my holes were on the slightly smaller side, so I did have a bit of difficulty getting the laces through them. But again, to start the lacing, we're going to take the lace that has come out of hole number 2. We're going to take it on top of the shoe to lace hole number 3, push it in from the top through to the bottom, take it underneath the shoe, and then pull it out through the top of hole number 4. So you're going in the bottom of hole number 4, coming out through the top of hole number 4. A reminder that the lacing image that you see on the screen is linked down below so that you can use that to assist you to do the lacing. Now you're going to take the lace from hole number 4 to hole number 5 over the shoe, and you're going to go into hole number 5 from underneath the shoe. So go around the outside of the shoe and stick the lace from the bottom through to the top of hole number 5. The remainder of the lacing is done with the person's foot on the shoe. With my husband's foot inside or on top of his shoe, I now took that lace and I made 3 loops around the long piece that came from hole number 4 to hole number 5. Then I took the lace around the back of his foot to the other side to hole number 6. Similar to what you did with hole number 5, with hole number 6, we want to go in to the bottom of the hole. So you go around the outside of the shoe, take the lace up through the bottom, pull it out of the top, and then make the same 3 loops around the long piece of lace that you had that came from lace hole number 5. Finally, we want to go back to the lace that's come out of hole number 1, so the remainder of the lace that's at the toe, and take it to hole number 7 and go around the shoe and take it in from the bottom of the shoe, pull it out through the top of the shoe, make 1 loop around the long piece of the lace, and then take it across your foot. And we're super almost done with the shoes, but once they were on my husband's feet and laced up, we marked on them where we want to cut away any of the excess leather or make any adjustments to the laces. And then I unlaced them, cut away that excess leather so that we can lace them again for the final shoe. And the shoes are completed, ready to be tested outside. With the lacing, we didn't do it here because it was Ian's first time wearing them, but since he's been wearing them more, what you can do with that long piece that came from the lace hole number 1 is you can wrap it twice around the leg if you want to, otherwise you can cut it short. And that brings us to the end of how I made barefoot sandals for Ian, and he's been wearing them for a few days since I've made them, and he is enjoying them more and more. I'm feeling quite excited now to make him the running ones with slightly thicker laces and probably a canvas top, so stay tuned for that. And if you end up making these, please let me know in the comments down below how that's gone for you and what your experience was, or any tips that you can share with anybody else who would like to make barefoot sandals.